The white room had no windows, only bright lights that hurt General Veltar's eyes when he first walked in. He had been in this place for 3 years now. 3 long years since the war ended. 3 years since his people lost everything to the humans. Veltar sat in the metal chair and looked at the woman across from him. She was small like most humans. Her black hair was tied back in a simple way. Her dark eyes watched him carefully. She had a small device in her hands that would record everything they said. "My name is Yuki Tanaka," the woman said. Her voice was soft but firm. "I write about wars for people to read. Thank you for agreeing to talk with me." Veltar nodded his large head. His skin was gray like stone, and his eyes were much bigger than human eyes. When he spoke, a small machine changed his words into human language. "I have been thinking about this for a long time," Veltar said. "The galaxy needs to know what really happened. They need to understand what your people are really like." Yuki turned on her recording device. "Let's start at the beginning. Before the war started, what did your people think about humans?" Veltar made a sound that might have been laughter, but it sounded bitter. "We thought you were nothing, just another weak race that we would easily control. The Nexari Empire had conquered hundreds of worlds. We had the biggest fleet in the galaxy, the strongest weapons, the best soldiers." He paused and looked at his hands. They were much larger than human hands, with long fingers that ended in sharp points. "Your people had just learned to travel between stars," he continued. "You had maybe 200 ships. Small ones. Old ones. We had 3,000 of the most powerful warships ever built. The math was simple. We would win in a few days, maybe a week at most." Yuki wrote notes on a small pad. "When did you first encounter human forces?" "It was Captain Han Sol Kim who first spoke to us," Veltar said. "Our fleet had just arrived. At the edge of your space, we expected fear. We expected begging. Instead, this Captain Kim sent us a message." Veltar closed his eyes and remembered that day. It felt like a lifetime ago. "The message was very short," he said. "Captain Kim told us we had 3 minutes to leave human space. If we did not leave, he said his people would consider it an act of war." "How did your fleet react?" Yuki asked. "We laughed," Veltar admitted. "The bridge of my flagship was full of laughter." 3 minutes? This tiny human was giving us an ultimatum? It was like a small child threatening a giant. Veltar stood up and walked to the wall. There was nothing to see there, but he needed to move. Sitting still made the memories harder to bear. "Our Admiral Zurvan sent a reply," he continued. "He told your Captain Kim that humans had 1 hour to surrender all their worlds. If they did this, we would let most of them live as our servants. If they refused, we would destroy every human in the galaxy." "What happened next?" Yuki asked, though she already knew the answer. Everyone in the galaxy knew what happened next. "Your Captain Kim waited exactly 3 minutes," Veltar said. "Then the shooting started." Veltar turned back to face Yuki. His big eyes looked sad and tired. "We still thought it would be easy," he said. "Yes, the humans were fighting back, but they were so few, so weak. Our computers calculated that we would win with minimal losses. The war would be over in 10 days. But it wasn't," Yuki said. "No," Veltar agreed. "It was not. The first thing we learned was that humans do not fight the way other races fight. Every other species we had conquered followed the same patterns. They would try to protect their important worlds. They would keep their fleets together. They would surrender when the losses became too great." Veltar sat back down in his chair. The metal creaked under his weight. "Humans did none of these things," he said. "Captain Kim split his small fleet into even smaller groups. Instead of protecting your big worlds, he sent ships to attack our supply lines. Instead of fighting our main fleet, he hit our support ships." "Guerrilla warfare," Yuki said. "Yes, but more than that," Veltar replied. "It was like fighting smoke. Every time we thought we had caught a human ship, it would disappear. Every time we thought we had them cornered, they would attack us from a different direction." "Veltar, was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was even softer. After the first week, I started to realize something was wrong. We had destroyed maybe 30 human ships, but we had lost almost twice that number. Our own ships were bigger and stronger, but the humans were smarter. They knew our weaknesses, before we knew them ourselves. How? Yuki asked. They studied us, Veltar said. While we were laughing at them, they were learning everything about our ships, our weapons, our tactics. Captain Kim had been preparing for this war long before we knew humans existed. Veltar looked directly at Yuki. That was when I first understood that we had made a terrible mistake. We thought we were fighting a primitive species, but primitive species do not plan for wars against enemies they have never met. Primitive species do not sacrifice their own ships to learn about enemy weaknesses. What did you think then? Yuki asked. I thought we were in trouble, Veltar said, but I had no idea how much trouble. The real war had not even started yet. The recording device continued to run, capturing every word. Outside the White Room, the galaxy continued to wonder how the mighty Nexari Empire had fallen to a species that most had never heard of just 4 years ago. Veltar knew the answer, but explaining it would take time. There was so much more to tell. Veltar's hand shook a little as he reached for the cup of water on the table. The memories of what came next were harder to talk about. Yuki waited patiently, her pen ready to write. The Battle of Proxima Centauri changed everything, Veltar said after drinking some water. That was where we learned what humans really are. He set the cup down carefully. Even after 3 years, thinking about that battle made him feel sick. We had been fighting Captain Kim's ships for 2 weeks, he continued. Small battles, hit-and-run attacks. We were getting frustrated, but we were not worried yet. Then our scouts found something interesting. What did they find? Yuki asked. A human colony, Veltar said. 3 mining worlds around Proxima Centauri. Thousands of human civilians. No military ships to protect them. It looked like an easy target. Veltar closed his eyes. Admiral Zuravan was excited. He said we would destroy the colonies and force the humans to come fight us properly, make them face our main fleet in open battle where our numbers would win. But there was a problem, Yuki said. Commander Bora Choi, Veltar said, and his voice had respect in it now. She was in charge of defending those colonies. When our fleet arrived, she had maybe 20 ships, old cargo haulers, a few patrol boats, nothing that should have been able to fight our war fleet. Veltar stood up again and began to pace around the small room. Admiral Zuravan sent the usual message, he said. Surrender or die. Commander Choi sent back a reply that I will never forget. What did she say? She said, come and take them. Veltar stopped pacing and looked at Yuki. 3 words. That was all. But the way she said it, there was no fear in her voice, no doubt. She knew she was going to die. But she was not afraid. What happened when the battle started? Nothing went the way it was supposed to, Veltar said. We expected the human ships to form a battle line and fight us ship to ship. Instead, they scattered in all directions. Veltar sat back down. Commander Choi had turned everything into a weapon. Cargo ships full of mining explosives became bombs. They would fly straight at our ships and explode. Old freighters became missile platforms. Even the mining equipment on the planets became artillery. The humans weaponized civilian infrastructure. Yuki noted. Everything. Veltar agreed. Every rock hauler, every transport shuttle, every piece of mining equipment. But it was not just the weapons. It was the way they used them. Veltar was quiet for a moment, remembering. There was one cargo ship, he said slowly. The captain was a woman named Sumi Park. Her ship was damaged and losing air. She could have ejected in an escape pod. Instead, she aimed her ship at our command cruiser and fired her engines at full power. A suicide attack, Yuki said. Yes, but she did something else first, Veltar said. She sent a message to all the other human ships. She told them exactly where to hit our cruiser to cause the most damage. Then she crashed into our shields and exploded. Veltar's voice got quieter. Her sacrifice created a gap in our defenses. The other human ships used that gap to destroy the cruiser. 800 of my people died because one human woman chose to give her life for information. How did the ground battle go? Worse, Veltar said immediately. We landed troops on all 3 worlds. We had better weapons, better armor, more soldiers. It should have been easy. Veltar rubbed his forehead with one large hand. Colonel Dongwu Park commanded the human ground forces, he said. He had maybe 3,000 soldiers. We had 15,000. But Park did not fight like any soldier we had ever seen. How was he different? He made the planets themselves fight us, Veltar explained. The humans knew every tunnel, every cave, every hiding place. They would attack us and then disappear underground. When we followed them, the tunnels would collapse. Veltar's voice got harder. Park's soldiers would hide in the mines during the day and attack our camps at night. They used the mining equipment to dig new tunnels right under our feet. They turned the entire planet into a maze. But you had superior numbers and firepower, Yuki pointed out. It did not matter, Veltar said. The humans were not trying to win a normal battle. They were trying to make us pay the highest price possible for every meter of ground. Veltar was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was very soft. The end came on the 3rd day, he said. We had Colonel Park and his remaining soldiers trapped in a mining complex. Maybe 500 humans left. We had them surrounded with 2,000 troops. What happened? Colonel Park sent us a message, Veltar said. He said his soldiers would not surrender. He said they would rather die than let us take their worlds. Veltar's hands clenched into fists. Then he did something that still gives me nightmares, he continued. Colonel Park ordered his own soldiers to blow up the ammunition storage in the complex. He killed himself and all his remaining troops just to take as many of us with him as possible. How many did you lose? Yuki asked quietly. 3,000 soldiers, Veltar said. Colonel Park's sacrifice killed 3,000 of my people in one explosion. Veltar looked up at the ceiling. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was his final message. As the explosion started, Colonel Park sent one last transmission to our fleet. What did he say? He said, "Tell them we were here," Veltar replied. That was all. Tell them we were here. Veltar was quiet for several minutes. Yuki waited, not wanting to interrupt his thoughts. We won the battle, Veltar finally said. We took the 3 worlds, but it cost us 50 ships and almost 5,000 soldiers. To defeat 20 human ships and 3,000 ground troops. That must have changed your tactical thinking, Yuki observed. It should have, Veltar agreed. But Admiral Zurvan was angry, not worried. He said the humans had just gotten lucky. He said the next battle would be different. Veltar looked directly at Yuki. He was right. The next battle was different. It was worse. The recording device continued to capture every word, preserving the testimony of a general who had learned too late what it meant to fight against humanity. Veltar asked for a break. He walked to the corner of the room and stood there for several minutes without speaking. Yuki could see that remembering these battles was hard for him. When he came back to the table, his gray skin looked paler than before. The siege of Terra's Gate, he said. That is what your military historians call it now. We called it something else. What did you call it? Yuki asked. The place where the impossible became real, Veltar answered. That was where we learned that humans do not follow the rules that govern the rest of the galaxy. Veltar sat down, heavily in his chair. Terra's Gate was your most important military station. It controlled the main route to Earth. If we could take it, we could strike at your homeworld directly. How many ships did you bring? 800 of our best warships, Veltar said. The humans had maybe 100 ships defending the station. But these were not cargo haulers or patrol boats. These were real warships commanded by Admiral Su-Jin Lee. Veltar's voice changed when he said the Admiral's name. There was something that might have been fear, but also respect. What was special about Admiral Lee? Yuki asked. She was insane, Veltar said immediately. But it was a useful kind of insane. She did things that our computers said were impossible. Things that broke every rule of space warfare we had learned in 1,000 years of conquest. Veltar reached for his water cup again. The battle should have lasted maybe 6 hours. We had 8 times as many ships, better weapons, thicker armor. Our battle computers calculated a 97% chance of victory. But it didn't go that way. The battle lasted 6 days, Veltar said. 6 days of fighting that should not have been possible. Admiral Lee's ships kept fighting even when they should have been dead in space. Veltar began to pace again. Moving seemed to help him think through the painful memories. There was one ship, he said. Admiral Lee's flagship, a heavy cruiser, called the Indomitable. On the second day of battle, our ships tore huge holes in its hull. It lost life support. The bridge was destroyed. By every rule of warfare, that ship should have stopped fighting. But it didn't. It kept shooting at us for 4 more days, Veltar said, and his voice was full of amazement even now. 4 days without life support. 4 days with the crew, wearing pressure suits and breathing emergency air. 4 days with no proper command center. Veltar stopped pacing and looked at Yuki. Do you know how they did it? Yuki shook her head. Engineer Woo-Sung Kim, Veltar said. He kept the ship's weapons working by crawling through damaged sections of the ship and manually connecting power cables. For 4 days, this one human worked in a broken ship with only a few hours of air in his suit. How did he survive? He didn't sleep, Veltar said simply. For 4 days, Engineer Kim worked non-stop to keep his ship fighting. When his air ran low, other crew members would give him their spare oxygen tanks. When he got too tired to work, they would give him stimulant drugs to keep him awake. Veltar sat back down. Our doctors say that is impossible. No living being can work for 4 days without sleep while breathing emergency air in a damaged ship. But Engineer Kim did it anyway. What about the other ships? All of them were like that, Veltar said. Ships fighting with no shields. Crews working without food or water. Weapons firing even when the ships had no power left. Veltar was quiet for a moment. There was one captain, Yoonji Nam. Her ship was a light cruiser called the Defiance. On the 5th day, her ship took a direct hit from one of our plasma cannons. The entire back half of her ship was destroyed. Was she killed? No, Veltar said. Captain Nam was still alive, but her ship was finished. No engines, no weapons, no chance of survival. Any sane person would have surrendered or tried to escape. Veltar's voice got quieter. Instead, Captain Nam did something that still makes our scientists argue with each other. She used her damaged faster-than-light drive as a weapon. How is that possible? It should not be, Veltar said. A damaged FTL drive should just explode and destroy the ship that carries it. But Captain Nam found a way to control the explosion. She aimed it at our battle group. Veltar closed his eyes. What happened next? Our scientists still do not understand it completely. Captain Nam's ship tore a hole in space itself. A hole that pulled in everything around it. How many ships did you lose? 43 warships, Veltar said. One broken human cruiser destroyed 43 of our best ships by turning its own death into a weapon. Yuki wrote quickly, trying to capture all the details. What was Captain Nam's final message? She recited a poem, Veltar said. An old human poem about a light that shines in darkness. She was still reciting it when her ship disappeared into the hole she had created. Veltar stood up and walked to the wall again. That was when I finally understood what we were really fighting. What do you mean? Other species fight to win, Veltar explained. They fight to gain territory or resources or power. Humans fight for something different. What do they fight for? They fight for the idea that some things are more important than winning. Veltar said. Captain Nam could have tried to escape. Engineer Kim could have abandoned his damaged ship. Admiral Lee could have retreated when the odds became impossible. Veltar turned back to face Yuki. But they did not do any of those things. They chose to keep fighting even when fighting meant certain death. They chose to turn their own deaths into weapons that could hurt us. Why? Because they were not fighting for themselves, Veltar said. They were fighting for the humans who would come after them, for the children who lived on Earth, for people they would never meet who might live because they chose to die. Veltar sat back down. After 6 days, we finally took Terra's Gate, but it cost us 300 ships. More than half our fleet was gone, and we still had not reached Earth. What did Admiral Zurvan say? He was furious, Veltar said. He blamed our ship captains for being cowards. He blamed our weapons for being defective. He blamed everyone except himself for not understanding what we were fighting. Veltar looked tired. But I was starting to understand. These humans were not just another species to be conquered. They were something new, something that our empire had never faced before. What were they? They were people who had decided that some things were worth any price, Veltar said. And they were willing to pay that price. The recording device continued to run, capturing the words of a general who had learned that mathematics and superior firepower meant nothing against an enemy who refused to accept defeat. Veltar was quiet for a long time before he started talking again. His large hands were clenched together on the table, and Yuki could see that this part of the story was the hardest for him to tell. After Terra's Gate, everything changed, he said finally. Admiral Zurvan was dead. His ship was one of the 43 that Captain Nam destroyed. Command of the fleet fell to me. How did that change things? I was not as arrogant as Zurvan, Veltar said. I had seen what humans could do. I knew we were in serious trouble, but I still thought we could win if we were more careful. Veltar took a deep breath. I was wrong. The humans were not finished surprising us. What happened next? We discovered the prison world, Veltar said, and his voice became very quiet. Tartarus, you call it now. We had been using it to hold human prisoners since the war began. Yuki stopped writing. She knew about Tartarus. Everyone in the galaxy knew about Tartarus now. We thought it was safe, Veltar continued. The planet was far from any human worlds. It had no strategic value, no resources worth fighting for, just a place to keep prisoners until the war ended. But General Jaewu Moon found it. Yes, Veltar said. General Moon and his liberation fleet. When they arrived at Tartarus, I had 1,500 ships guarding the system. General Moon had maybe 300 ships. I thought it would be another easy victory. Veltar's voice got harder. I was a fool. What made this battle different? The humans were angry, Veltar said simply. Not just fighting angry, not just war angry. They were furious in a way that I had never seen before. Veltar stood up and began pacing again. When General Moon's ships attacked, they did not try to capture our vessels. They did not try to force us to surrender. They just tried to destroy us as quickly as possible. Why were they so angry? Veltar stopped pacing. Because of what we had done to their people on Tartarus. The prisoners we held there. We had not treated them well. Yuki knew the stories, but she waited for Veltar to continue. General Moon sent me a message before the battle began, Veltar said. He told me that if any of the human prisoners had been harmed, he would make sure that none of my ships left the system alive. What did you tell him? I lied, Veltar admitted. I told him the prisoners were being treated according to galactic law. I told him they were safe and healthy. Veltar sat back down. But General Moon did not believe me. He said his people would rather die fighting than live as our prisoners. Then he ordered his ships to attack. How was this battle different from the others? The humans fought like demons, Veltar said. There is no other way to describe it. They took risks that made no sense. They sacrificed their ships without hesitation. It was like fighting an enemy that wanted to die as long as they could kill you first. Veltar was quiet for a moment. There was one captain, Hyorin Seo. She commanded a troop transport full of human marines. Her mission was to land on Tartarus and rescue the prisoners. Did she succeed? Yes. But the cost? Veltar shook his head. Captain Seo's ship had to fight through our entire defensive fleet to reach the planet. By the time she landed, her ship was barely holding together. Veltar's voice got softer. Her marines had to fight through the prison complex to reach the human prisoners. The atmosphere on Tartarus is poisonous to most species. The gravity is 3 times normal. It should have been impossible for humans to fight effectively there. But they did it anyway. They did more than that, Veltar said. Captain Seo's Marines fought for 18 hours in an environment that was slowly killing them. Their suits were damaged. Their air was running out. But they would not stop until every human prisoner was free. Veltar looked directly at Yuki. There was one Marine, Sergeant Minho Bay. His squad was trapped in the deepest part of the prison complex. The only way out was through a tunnel filled with poisonous gas. What did he do? He took off his helmet, Veltar said. Sergeant Bay breathed the poison gas directly so he could use his helmet's air supply to keep his wounded soldiers alive. He died getting his squad to safety, but all of them survived because of what he did. Yuki wrote down the name carefully. How many Marines did Captain Seo lose? Almost half, Veltar said. But she got every prisoner out alive, every single one. Veltar was quiet for several minutes. When he spoke again, his voice was full of shame. When I saw what we had done to those prisoners, I finally understood why the humans were so angry. We had not just been keeping them captive. We had been torturing them. Why? Because we were frustrated, Veltar said. Because the war was not going the way we expected. Because we wanted to break human morale by breaking human bodies. Veltar's hands shook a little. It was wrong. Even by the standards of war, it was wrong. And the humans made us pay for it. How did the battle end? With our complete defeat, Veltar said. General Moon kept his promise. Every ship in my fleet was destroyed or captured. I survived only because my ship was boarded by human Marines, who took me prisoner. Was that when you surrendered? No, Veltar said. That was when I realized we could not win this war, but the fighting continued for 3 more months. Why didn't you surrender then? Because our empire would not listen, Veltar said. The High Command sent more fleets. They sent our best ships and our most experienced commanders. They were certain that humans could not defeat the full might of the Nexari Empire. Veltar looked tired. They were wrong. The humans showed them how wrong they were. How? Commander Sang-Hoon Lim, Veltar said, and the Battle of Nexar Prime. That was where the war really ended. Veltar stood up and walked to the corner of the room again. But that is a story that still gives me nightmares. A story about what happens when you make humans angry enough to come to your home world. The recording device continued to capture his words, preserving the testimony of a general who had learned too late that some enemies cannot be defeated by force alone. Veltar took a long time before he was ready to continue. He walked around the small room several times, his large feet making soft sounds on the metal floor. Finally, he sat back down and looked directly at Yuki. The Battle of Nexar Prime, he said. Our homeworld. The heart of our empire. That was where the humans taught us the final lesson about what they really are. Tell me about Commander Sang-Hoon Lim, Yuki said. He was commanding a small human fleet, Veltar said. Maybe 50 ships, old destroyers and cruisers, nothing special. Nothing that should have been able to threaten our most important world. Veltar's voice got quieter. But Commander Lim was not trying to conquer Nexar Prime. He was trying to send a message. What kind of message? That nowhere was safe, Veltar said. That if we continued this war, the humans would bring the fighting to every world we cared about, even our home. Veltar stood up and began pacing again. Nexar Prime had the strongest defenses in the galaxy, orbital weapons platforms, shield generators, 2,000 ships guarding the system. It should have been impossible for any enemy to get close to the planet. But Commander Lim found a way. He did something that our military experts still argue about, Veltar said. He flew his ships through our own minefield, a field of space mines that we had placed to protect the planet. How is that possible? The mines were programmed to destroy any ship that did not have Nexari identification codes, Veltar explained. But Commander Lim had studied our technology for months. He found a way to make his ships look like Nexari vessels to our own sensors. Veltar stopped pacing. By the time we realized what was happening, Commander Lim's fleet was already inside our defenses, already close to Nexar Prime itself. What happened when your forces tried to stop him? Commander Lim split his fleet into individual ships, Veltar said. Each ship went in a different direction. Some attacked our weapons platforms, some went after our shield generators, some flew directly toward the planet. Veltar's voice got harder. But Commander Lim himself did something that none of us expected. His ship, a heavy destroyer called the Retribution, flew straight toward our command station. The station that controlled your entire defense network? Yes, Veltar said. The most heavily protected structure in the system. It had its own shields, its own weapons, its own fleet of guard ships. Commander Lim should not have been able to get anywhere near it. Veltar sat back down. But his ship was already damaged from fighting through our defenses. The Retribution was losing air, losing power, losing everything that kept it alive. So what did he do? He turned his ship into a missile, Veltar said simply. Commander? Lim aimed the Retribution directly at our command station and fired his engines at full power. Veltar was quiet for a moment. As his ship flew toward certain death, Commander Lim sent a final transmission. Not to us, to his own people. What did he say? He recited poetry, Veltar said. Old poems from Earth. Poems about honor and sacrifice and love for his homeworld. He was still reciting when his ship hit our command station. Veltar's voice got very soft. The explosion destroyed the station and knocked out our planetary defenses. But more than that, it showed every person on Nexar Prime that humans could reach us anywhere, that this war would never end until one of our peoples was completely destroyed. Is that when your government decided to surrender? Yes, Veltar said. The High Command finally understood that humans would never stop fighting, that they would rather die than accept defeat, that they would keep coming no matter how many of them we killed. Veltar looked down at his hands. But the real end of the war did not come from our surrender. It came from something much more surprising. What do you mean? After Commander Lim destroyed our command station, there were still human ships in the system, Veltar said. They could have attacked our cities. They could have killed millions of civilians on Nexar Prime. But they didn't? No, Veltar said. Instead, they sent rescue ships to help the survivors from the command station. Human ships that had been trying to kill us an hour before were now saving our lives. Veltar's voice was full of wonder. That was when I met Lieutenant Jin Ai. Tell me about her. She was young, Veltar said. Maybe 22 years old. She was the human officer who came to accept my formal surrender. I expected her to be proud, arrogant, happy about defeating us. Was she? She was sad, Veltar said. Lieutenant An told me that her entire family had been killed when we bombed Luna Colony at the beginning of the war. Her parents, her brothers, everyone she loved was dead because of what my people had done. Veltar looked up at Yuki. I expected her to hate me. I expected her to want revenge. Instead, she offered me water and medical treatment for my wounds. Why did she do that? I asked her the same question, Veltar said. Lieutenant An told me something that I have thought about every day since then. What did she say? She said that tomorrow we would have to rebuild, Veltar repeated. And rebuilding requires forgiveness. Veltar was quiet for a long time. That was when I finally understood what makes humans different from every other species in the galaxy. What makes them different? They fight not just to win, but to create a better universe for their enemies to live in afterward, Veltar said. Other species fight to destroy their opponents. Humans fight to change them. Veltar stood up and walked to the recording device. That is why I agreed to give this interview. That is why I have finally broken my silence about the war. Why? Because the galaxy needs to understand what humans really are, Veltar said. Politicians and military experts have spent 3 years trying to explain how humans defeated the Nexari Empire. They talk about superior tactics, or better technology, or lucky breaks. Veltar looked directly into the recording device. They are all wrong. Humans won because they were fighting for something bigger than victory. They were fighting for the idea that the universe can be better than it is. He turned back to Yuki. That is why the human war front was hell. Not because they destroyed us, but because they forced us to see what we could become. Veltar sat back down. Lieutenant An was right. We did rebuild, but we rebuilt as something better than we were before. The Nexari people are not the same, species that started this war 4 years ago. How are you different? We learned that strength is not about how much you can destroy, Veltar said. Real strength is about what you choose to build after the fighting stops. Veltar reached over and turned off the recording device himself. That is my message to the galaxy. Humans are not the strongest species. They are not the smartest or the most advanced. But they are the only species that fights not just to win, but to make their enemies into friends. He stood up and bowed in the human fashion, a gesture of respect that would have been impossible 4 years earlier. Thank you for listening to my story, Veltar said. I hope others will learn from it before they make the same mistakes we did. Yuki bowed back, understanding that she had just recorded something important, something that would help the galaxy understand why the human war front had been hell, and why that hell had led to something better for everyone.